Good Tuesday afternoon. We're back with show number 2. Today we are going to be talking about controlling the narrative and racial stereotypes. All that and more is coming at you with music and fun in less than 5. Good afternoon. Good Tuesday afternoon, everyone. We typically tape on Thursdays, but today we got a little off track, but we're glad that you decided to join us anyway. This is Doc Rob coming at you with the Intellectual Soul Food Lunch Buffet, and our date is a little bit off because we were supposed to do this on the 24th. We're a little off. Sue the chef. We have with us, joining us, our Intellectual Soul Food sous chefs in training. We're going to pivot to each one of them. We've got Caleb. Caleb, check in for us and let us know who you are, where you come from, what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Caleb Ingram. I'm a senior criminal justice student here at North Carolina Central University. Yeah, I'm just kind of excited to kind of discuss the different topics we have on the list today.
We are grateful that you could make it with us today. And we also have a returning veteran, another co-producer, Gregory Rogers. Gregory, check in for us.
Hello, my name is Gregory Rogers. I'm also a senior mass communication major. I'm happy to be here.
We are so glad that you are all with us, and let's go after it. Let's get to it. We've got some stuff in front of us today. Our menu actually is going to consist of the following. We're going to first start with our usual current events, and then we're going to jump straight into our controlling the narrative discussion where we have two important guests with us today. They come to us both from media, and they are media professionals. We're happy to have them with us. And then we're going to jump into our media diversity highlight. So, gentlemen, let's get started with our first round of current events. Our first current event is the Super Bowl halftime show. Tell me what you think about that. What's going on with that?
Yeah, it was the first Super Bowl show with mostly black individuals, including Eminem. Some people are actually mad about it because the representation of only black people and how Snoop Dogg was wearing his flags, crip walking. But I
Mm-hmm.
actually think it's good for the culture of not only California or where they're from, but also for the black community.
What about you, Caleb? What do you think about it?
I thought it was cool. I'm not really like a big Super Bowl halftime football guy, but I thought it was a cool performance. This is like the first one that Jay-Z actually kind of curated with him being like he has like a new chair within the NFL, being I think it's like the special or creative director or something like that. But he kind of just deals with the arts, and how that can be incorporated with the NFL. So I definitely feel like you can see his influence in the performance. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I like that we was able to have a platform for Black culture that a lot of people who usually attend the Super Bowl usually don't see.
That's
So yeah, I thought it was cool.
good points. And I think what's also historic about this is that for the first time, the Super Bowl halftime show had sign language interpreters. Joining Jay Z, you have Sean Forbes and Warren Snipes. Both, Sean Forbes, at least, he is a rap hip hop sign artist, which is fantastic. And that actually says that they are moving at another level of diversity and inclusion. I think to some degree we may have gotten lost in some of that message because we're thinking more so about the racial components. But the fact that this was now ADA compliant says a lot for the NFL. Kudos to the NFL for going in that direction. Up next, we have something that you're going to talk to us about, Caleb. I'm sorry, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now, we all know that the Super Bowl halftime show gave us this brand new re-imaging of Bel-Air 22, the dramatic series. Caleb, talk to us about that.
Yes, so I actually watched this episode a couple of days ago, well, the first two episodes. And I really think it's really cool. If anyone else hasn't watched it, I definitely think you guys should go watch it. They just really kind of took the premise of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and just kind of modernized it. But like the characters and like the situations that they're in are completely different. And I think it's really cool. Like they definitely address like a lot of like hot topics. Like in the first episode, they have Carlton, who's at a majority white. He's on a majority white athletic team, and they're in the locker room, and they're singing. It's a song. I don't know if you guys know who Bobby Shmurda is, but it's a song where the N word is used a lot, and the white people around Carlton were using the word. And so Will, when seeing this, he kind of confronted Carlton about it and some of the white people. Um, and I just thought that was really cool because that's a conversation that I think we're always having in the Black community. And so I thought it was cool that I was able to see it in that way. And it was people like my age kind of like addressing it and talking about it. Um, so yeah, it was really interesting. I like how they kind of played off of Carlton, like who he was in the original show. And just kind of like the whole show is, but they just kind of dramatized it a little bit more. So I thought it was really interesting.
What about you, Greg?
It was like a good show.
Thank you. Greg, what about you? What do you think? Did you get a chance to see it?
I haven't seen it, but I feel like it's how Caleb described it. It's a show that should be out talking about like different type of topics like the N word. I just wish they would have made it a little bit separate from Fresh Prince because since Fresh Prince was such a iconic show, I feel like they should have just left that alone. Give
Now
it a
you
different
sound
name.
now you sound like me because I'm the one that's simply like, wait a minute, you can't take my old TV shows and turn them into now new shows. It's
Right.
almost like there's a lack of, and I would say, creativity in some of these green rooms, if you will, not green rooms, but in some of these, I guess, talks, these pilot pitch rooms. So that's something I would think about.
Right.
Let's turn the conversation to something again. I think Caleb, this is something that you know about, and that is something called racist NFT. So, what exactly is an NFT, and why is this important?
So NFT stands for a non-fungible token. And so in layman's terms, basically what this means is that like for example, if I were to screenshot my screen right now and have the picture, I could create this picture and upload it and turn it into an NFT. And so what makes NFTs different from like other like currencies or cryptocurrencies is that it's a one of one. So only I can own the NFT. And I can sell it for X amount of cryptocurrency, but it's still my sole design and my sole artwork. And so with these like meta slaves and like other like kind of interestingly designed NFTs, they kind of pull from a lot of racial stereotypes, um, and not these specific that you have on the screen, but there's some other ones that are like monkeys,
Right.
and they're just kind of dressed in certain different ways, and some of them, based on the designs, kind of ambiguously are pulling from racial stereotypes. And so some of the creators are just kind of saying, well, we just thought this was like a funny thing to make, or we didn't really see the harm or the offensive nature of them, so we just created them. Um, and I just think it kind of talks about a bigger issue of like a lack of diversity in like the, I guess, metaverse, for lack of a better term. And I think just having more Black people in the space will kind of get rid of things like this. And to my knowledge, most of these projects have been taken down. But the problem with NFTs is that since it's a one of one, actually taking down the like the server or whoever's like creating them actually makes them even more rare and more sought after, like within the metaverse. So it's just an ongoing problem that I think can really only be solved with the inclusion of Black people in the space.
Good points. Good points. We're now going to go ahead and turn to our LGBTQ family. And Ariana DeVos, who was most recently in West Side Story, has now made historic wins, specifically in the SAG Awards, because she is the first Latina queer woman to win said award. What do you think about that, gentlemen?
I feel like it's really deserved. I seen Lady Gaga comment about it, saying that this was like a fangirl moment for her, and I'm a fan of hers too. So I just feel like it's a great moment in history.
Very good. And as we go ahead and close the loop, Essence Magazine also is taking a big leap forward in LGBTQ relations as they are going to have their first lesbian couple on the cover. Try saying that 3 times. You have Niecy Nash, and who is her husband
Her wife is Jessica
or
Betts.
wife? Excuse me. Who is her wife?
Jessica Betts.
Jessica Betts. Thank you. Bad slip. Again, yes. So this is a big first for Essence Magazine because they actually are actually going to have a same-sex couple on their cover. And I think this is a rather interesting moment, part due to the fact because we know uh, the LGBTQ space has really been somewhat conservative when it comes to BIPOC people. So all of that is just fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you for helping us with the current events. And now when we get back after this quick break, this quick message, we're going to go ahead and have a conversation about how we change the narrative. So we'll see you in roughly about, I would say, 30 seconds.
1.3 billion people are affected by some form of blindness or visual impairment. 466 million people have a disabling deafness and hearing loss. About 200 million people have an intellectual disability, and 75 million people need a wheelchair on a daily basis. People see the disability rather than the person, but disability is not an inability. A person's ability may be different, but is still an ability. Don't let it define you. You control your own destiny.
So, welcome back. So, as we said before, we're going to talk about this conversation about controlling the narrative. In recent days, and actually in this class, we had a conversation about stereotypes, racial imagery, and what does it all look like? What does it mean? In fact, we had a conversation recently about even the use of the N word. As you can see here, you got the Washington, used to be Redskins, now Washington Commanders. And there even was a big brouhaha to change the logo, change the name of the team there, because there was an issue of racial sensitivity to our native indigenous people. And also, we're having conversations now about our Asians as well as how they have been depicted historically and how their imaging is changing for the better. But again, when we deal with BIPOC people in this country, we still have commerce that is being generated off of Black racial tropes and stereotypes. As you can see, you have Aunt Jemima and still have Uncle Ben. But then it becomes even more problematic, specifically as we have this conversation within our news economy or news ecosystem. You see here Sweet Brown, and then, of course, they auto-tuned her into the famous quote, "Ain't nobody got time for that." Joining us to help us unpack this riddle, this problem, we have two working professionals in the industry. We have Miss Rebecca Artist and we have Mr. Larry McGill. Miss Rebecca Artist, she actually is a stand-up comedian, but also has worked in the production field of, I would say, comedy, as well as done some video documentary work. Last week we talked about BIPOC digital content creators. She is one of them. Miss Artist, please check in for us.
Hello, how are you?
We're doing well. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an actor, writer, podcaster, producer. Basically, I don't wait for people to give me money and a job. And I've done work. I've done my own films. I'm a Second City alum. I was on the Second City main stage. I've worked with amazing people, and I've worked with big projects. I've worked with small projects, and currently I live here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I've also was a part of the Spotify Sound Up 2019 boot camp, and that's it.
Very good. We are grateful to have you with us today. And we have one of my former students who is now a professional in the broadcast journalism arena. We have Mr. Larry McGill. Larry, check in. Tell us a little about yourself as well.
Hey, good afternoon, Dr. Rob. As you said, my name is Larry McGill. I am a class of NCCU, or a part of the NCCU class of 2014, one of the first students out of NCCU to actually hold a degree in mass communications, so cool about that. I'm currently a producer at NBC 10 in Philadelphia. For people that don't know what that is, I work behind the scenes. I tell everybody, if you see me on camera, there's a problem because either I'm in the wrong place or the camera's pointed in the wrong place. As a producer, that means that we set the tone for what's in the show. We'll set the stories that are in there. We'll write the scripts. In our case, we'll write the video. Before I was at NBC 10 in Philadelphia, I was at WRAL News down there in Raleigh. One of the standard setting TV stations when it comes to local news. They're the first to do a whole lot of things. They're still the first to do a whole lot of things. And that's where a whole lot of people look for ideas and information when it comes to broadcasting. So I'm at two different places where, we set the standard. At NBC 10, we're the first to do a whole lot of things because we just moved into a new building a couple years ago. So the way that we're set up is completely different from what you'll find in most newsrooms. So it's cool to be a part of both of those operations, and glad to be able to talk about racial stereotypes in media with you and the students.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. I know this is going to be a robust, action-packed conversation. I'm happy that you both are here. So I'm going to just give us all a toss-up. And my students, I need you also, you're content experts too, because you study this at your level, I guess. And I'm going to use a word that you've used, Caleb, the metaverse, because things are entirely different from where I would say some of us who are tweeners or Gen Xers where we started, as far as the issue of racial stereotypes and imaging. I want to start with our person from Second City, Rebecca. Rebecca, tell us about this conversation that we're having, because you made a comment some time ago that you said that you felt to some degree this could be a repetitive conversation. Give me some info, give me some detail on that, and tell us why you think this conversation is cyclic, and do you think that we still need to have it?
So you're talking about like the use of the word, the N word, and how white people use it and how we use it. Is that what you're talking about in that context?
I think so, but also I think in the notion too, it's not just saying it now, but I would also argue that it's also about even the performativity of it, I guess, within our media ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, and maybe because I'm old, I don't know.
You're not old, you're vintage.
Yeah,
Stop it. You were born in 1970 something. You're not old.
I'm 40. Look, I'll just say it. I'm very proud of my age. I'm 44. I just turned 44 in January. But yeah, no, I think because, and I went to an HBCU, I went to Hampton University. So I studied theater at Hampton, and we talked about this. And when I went and I became a professional actor in Chicago, and I worked in LA, and then I worked in New York, and I worked in Atlanta, and so when you work in theater, television, and film, and you work with all these different amazing Black people, this conversation comes up, and I think after 20 plus years in working in this arena, we're now in a different stage. Because I was there in the beginning of the 2000s, right? I was coming in on the scene where Black people were just coming into our own. And, that was the time when I could go to Actors Access and there would be like maybe 4 audition listings for Black women, where now, if I go on Actors Access, Black women are pretty much dominant on the listing of auditions. Now Black women are producing their own work and they're dominating production space. Not saying that racism is over. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is now we have made our space. We are busting in rooms. We're creating our own rooms. So I just feel like we can talk about it, but we need to stop lamenting over it, because as we lament over it, what we're doing is we're giving power to the demon. And I'm done with giving power to the demon, because they're demons. Let's just say it. Oh, by the way, I love to make white people uncomfortable. That's my role in life. But no, they're demons. And so why are we giving power to the demons? And we need to start empowering ourselves and really focusing on the work that we can do and that we will do, and fund ourselves, create ourselves, and own our own words. And we could talk about it as far as historical, but I don't really think that this is something that really should sustain conversations anymore.
Right. Larry, talk to me about this from the world of TV news, the importance, I guess, also of the camera person. Do you think that, though we don't use the N word, do you think that by getting, I guess I hate to use the word stereotypical, but by getting someone that fits a stereotype, are we still using that word in that regards by performance?
I could see where you could make that argument, um, particularly when, now it's not just news people that have a camera, it's everybody, you know? Everybody's running around with a cell phone. And even when there's big breaking news stories, even us in a big market for a TV station will say, hey, if you've got video of this thing, send it in and we might use it on the air. So the sheer fact that everybody has a camera means that you have more people that don't have that filter that we would normally have as news folks,
Mhm.
that will sort of show you what's going on the streets. So, for instance, when you were talking about ain't nobody got time for that,
Right.
that was put on the air because it was a sensational bite. Now, us as black folk, we can generalize that you know, that might fall under the N word there. But for people that are not of color, that's just a sensational bite, you know? So now that you have more people with a camera that can put more things out there, even when we don't put it on the air, yeah, it certainly becomes a performative thing that would end up being tough to be put away. Even here in Philly, we've had our share of folks that have some for lack of a better word, some niggardly attitudes that that even we've put on the air before, and it's not necessarily in the worst case. But for instance, was last year, a couple of years ago, we had the guy that went viral because he's an ex-firefighter that was on the scene of a fire, and they had to send a baby out of the window. And the part that went viral wasn't the fact that he was an ex-firefighter that was helping out at the scene and saving a baby. It was the fact that he still had smoke for the Eagles and one of the wide receivers that that wasn't catching footballs, that he made the comparison.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the more that you have, and that was the part of the story. Everybody forgets why he was out there in the first place.
Right.
We got hit with the part that some people would argue was that kind of behavior. And so the more that you continue to look for the sensational bite, the more people have access to media things, especially now that you have, I don't know if y'all have it in Durham, this app called Citizen.
No, I don't think so.
So Citizen allows anybody with a cell phone, to roll up to the scene of something going on, whip out your cell phone, and you can immediately broadcast what's going on to the world. Now, most of the time, you can only get the app if you're in the city where that service is available. I think they've got like a couple dozen now. So for when it was just 5 cities, the only reason I don't live in Philadelphia proper, I work in Philadelphia and live in the suburbs. So it used to be that you could only get the app if you were actively in, like you couldn't even download it if your cell phone was outside of that city.
Mhm.
But I'm starting to get into the weeds. The thing is that now with apps like that, you have people that are immediately at the scene, and especially in a place like Philadelphia where there's a lot of shootings in the black neighborhood, there's all kinds of crazy things going on in the black neighborhood. All of a sudden, there's not the filter of someone in the newsroom who happens to be of color and says, "Hey, that's kind of stereotypical. Well, let's not put that nigga on the air."
So I get it.
You don't have that filter anymore because now anybody can see it, and they'll roll up to anybody and start asking questions, and there's no one to stop that from happening. So it does end up being a conversation that you continue to have, because people just assume that stereotype that gets put out there for the sensationalism is the one that prevails across across everybody. And it doesn't matter that we're in the 21st century now, and and even in media, there's all kinds of different black folk, right?
Right. So Larry, let me go ahead and take this to our students, because I want the students to chime in on this as well. Tell me, and I want you all to also ask questions too, because this is a conversation. It's not going to be Russell's show. But listen to what you've just heard. Do you think that we have come, have we made progress, not essentially perfection? Tell me where you think we are. Where do you think we are as far as how distant are we away from stereotypes? Do you think that we are also complicit in stereotypes?
As far as like progress, I don't think like as far as a conversation, I don't think there's been much progress made. I just think that now that kind of like with what Miss Artis was saying, I think that now that because we're having more Black people in these spaces, I think now the conversation is more like is having to happen more often. Like I think before when you had more predominantly white spaces, you didn't always have someone there to check them for using a word or using like a racially ambiguous like image or something like that. And so now that we have more Black people in media, in different media spaces, Black people coming from spaces where they're able to use that word colloquially, and now they're being presented in space where it's like, okay, when you have white people saying it and Hispanic people saying it, and I'm not really sure what race this person is, but they're saying it. I think the conversation just needs to be had more, but I don't really think that much progress has been made on the conversation.
Gregory, what about you?
Yeah, talking about the word like the conversation of like stereotypes. I feel like most people will play into stereotypes just to get a minute of fame. Because most people nowadays just want to be famous, especially on TikTok, where you gotta make maybe a 30-second video, and like the guest said, we're looking for sensational bites. But I also had a question. So do you think that Black people need to like continue like to play old roles, such as like slaves, such as example 12 years of slavery, or even the brute roles of like old movies to keep us like with our roots, or should we move on away from those stereotypes?
Rebecca, I think that's you.
Oh, and I'm going to piggyback
Sure.
about that woman who did the Ain't Nobody Got Time for That. She's a comedian.
Yes.
She's a professional comedian. And she purposely walked up to the journalist and did that. So we gotta also keep that in mind, the backstory behind that. And
Thank
she
you for the
purposely
clarity.
presented that trope, that stereotype, so that she could get on the air.
And see, I can almost guarantee you there was nobody in that newsroom that said, "Hey, we didn't need that," and that
But
could have
there
been squashed
actually,
on the spot.
but again, that was what was that, 10 years ago?
I was
Yeah, it's been a
about maybe
while.
10 years. About, yeah.
It's been
12.
a while. It's been a while. But we have to also have that in context. She's a comedian. Like she's a performer. And she, you know, she got an agent out of it. And that's what she wanted, right? But when it comes to stereotypes, first of all, something I learned at Hampton, which kind of gave me pushback when I first heard it, was all stereotypes are based on some form of truth. And that, like, I wanted to push back on that. I was like, oh hell no. But after I really looked at it, there's a lot of history in stereotypes. The watermelon stereotype. I recently found out that the reason why watermelon was really associated with Black people is because Black people were making tons of money selling watermelon. And a lot of farmers were profiting off of the sales of watermelon. And white farmers were getting pissed off about it. And so that's what became that whole Black people with the watermelon, right? So there's this thing like, wow, like, so watermelon was actually like there was this like great story behind it, yet it was twisted, just like those white recessive people always do. They love to twist shit, right? By the way, I curse. I love to curse. And so, but that's the crazy part about it. Going back to your question, oh my gosh, see, look at me, the Capricorn in me. I'm sorry. What is your question? One more time.
Well, go ahead, Gregory.
Do you think that Black people should get away from roles like slaves or like the
Oh,
brute?
right. Okay, so here's my issue. And by the way, Black people 20 years ago were in rooms standing up when tropes were created. I was one of them. And that's part of the reason why Second City never renewed my contract. Because I was that Black person who was like, I'm done playing a slave that's happy. Why do I constantly play this slave that's happy? Slaves were not happy. Slaves were raped, murdered. Babies were killed and eaten. They ate us. They used our skin for furniture. And it's Second City. There was supposed to be this like really progressive. All these white people were like, oh, I love Black people. They were repelled by me, and they were like, okay. And next thing I know, in the shady, wonderful white folk way, everybody got their contracts, and I was showing up at work, and I didn't get my contract. So there were Black people, but back then, before social media, we were whitelisted when we said something. And there were Black people that we would organize behind the scene, and we were like, okay, maybe if we form a group, maybe if all of us go into the production office or the producer's office together, and we would hope that not one Black person would retreat. So we were saying stuff. But now, because we're putting it out there on social media, now that there's no dispute, like what the brother said, people have cameras and they're walking into rooms. And that's what happened to Louis C.K. Women were recording him jerking off in meetings. If they weren't able to do that, Louis C.K. would still be working and visually assaulting women. Okay, so we were saying something. That's why this conversation has been had multiple times. But white people were able to disguise behind the closed doors and whitelist us. And that's why I didn't work for years. That's why people wouldn't touch me. I could have been up there with Lamorne Morris, who I worked with, but I wasn't like Lamorne. I'm sorry, Lamorne, I love you, but I'm going to call you out. I wasn't like Lamorne. I didn't shut my mouth up with white abuse. And so that's why today I'm sitting here in Raleigh, North Carolina with $120 in my bank account, trying to figure out how I can fund my next project. And Lamorne Morris is making millions of dollars. So we have to really talk about that. Now, to play slaves, see, my thing is, why are we playing a slave? And by the way, I'm a screenwriting professor. So I've gotten tons and tons of people's scripts. I've worked for people that are like, Rebecca, read the script, give feedback, let me know if I should produce it. So I've read script after script. And I've had brothers and sisters and white folks recently. White folks love to talk about Black folks' stories. And when a white person hands me a Black story, I go, why are you writing this? What's your purpose? But when Black people come to me with a slave story or enslaved African stories, because we were not slaves, we were enslaved. When they come to me with these stories, when they come to me with these, things about gangbangers and first of all, I grew up in Chicago, born and raised, And so I know why gangs were formed. Gangs were formed to mess with the police because we were tired of the police messing with us. We were tired of the police coming in and looting our communities because that's what they would do. And so we had to form the Blackstone Rangers, and from the Blackstone Rangers, you have the Latin Kings and all that stuff. All that was formed in Chicago. And so I understand that. And so when people come to me with a gang story, I'm like, why are you writing this? What message are you going to create this? Oh, we shoot each other? Or are we going to talk about that the biggest gang are police districts? Are we going to talk about that and how they incite these gang wars? So I'll write. So you could play a gang member. You could write a gang story. But let's talk about the real story. If we're going to talk about enslaved Africans, are we going to talk about how they were sodomized? Are we going to talk about white people eating babies? Are we going to talk about how white people were forcing their sons to have sex with their mothers? Are we going to talk about that? So then if we're going to talk about that, then yeah, let's talk about it. Then I'll read this. Then yes, play this. Yes, produce this. But if we're not, if we're going to whitewash things and we're going to make it a recessive conversation, then no, we should not play those stories.
Larry, what about you? Because you hit us from the reality world of news.
I mean, just on a pragmatic level, and this is taught. This is just simply on a pragmatic level of sharing Black stories, right?
Right.
It's not. I don't think it's so much the problem of Black people playing a slave and perpetuating a stereotype, but it's like Rebecca just mentioned. There's a certain amount of authenticity that comes with Black people telling those stories that you will not get if somebody who does not live the effects of all this will not understand how deep that is. You know, growing up in the South, you know, I'll always tell everybody I grew up in rural North Carolina, and part of the reason that I get a whole lot of old jokes is because my hometown is probably about 10 years behind everybody else in the world. So, you know, there's still, even today, little old Scotland County, North Carolina bears the scars of white people who made money off of Black folk. And this is well into, this isn't just slavery. This is well into the 20th century. And now there's no room for them to make money off of Black folk because there's no jobs in Scotland County. But you got folks that were conscripted into doing farm work. You know, that's just a generation back. My dad will tell you he worked a farm when he was a kid, and the only reason that he was able to go to school is because they figured out he was smart, and technically because he needed to go protect his sister, so he started school early. You don't have all these stories that get passed down. You don't have the full context if you don't have Black people writing and telling those stories. That's outside the news. That's outside. That's just on a pragmatic level. Hearing those stories that for instance, you know, one of the things I always sticks with me is when my parents and when my dad more so and his brothers and sisters talk about having to go out and do things like pick cotton, and you can see the emotion on their faces about certain things. So I've never picked cotton before in my life. The only reason I have picked a ball of cotton is because one of our favorite restaurants was next to a cotton field, and we would go out and fiddle around with it, and we'd have us a little cotton ball. The only reason that I know what it's like to do that is because of the stories that they would tell. And sometimes it was amusing and sometimes it was not. But the only reason that I know how painful it was to pick cotton is because they would sit around and talk about how they used to have to do it as kids. So I know that inside a little cotton ball is a little burr. And if you're not careful, that burr will prick your finger. And there's people that would come back from the cotton would be bloody because they would get hit by that burr if you didn't know how to do it just right. And you knew it was painful because when they would tell the story, even my dad now, when he talks about it, they hold their hands just like this. You can feel you can see the pain on their faces when they talk about it. There's a 2-lane highway in between my hometown, Laurinburg, and the closest major city, which is Fayetteville, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. You get there. There's no 4 lanes there. There's no 4 lanes between it. You can't. There's no interstate. Nothing. You know, there's farmland in between all those spaces. In between. Now, part of the reason that is interesting for me because a lot of my family land is along that little 2-lane road. So there's already those. You know, there's already just the inherent knowledge of being out there and being in that space, right? But then there's all this farmland, and I guarantee you, for each one of those fields, either my dad or his sister or my grandmother, when she was alive, had some kind of story about that field, and it would be something about even again, well into well into my, a generation behind, you had, almost an overseer that would come by in a big old pickup truck and come pick up little kids, young people, anybody else that could fit on the back of that truck and haul them out to whatever farm needed help. Or I shouldn't say needed help, was buying the labor for cheap.
Right. So
I can't call it slavery because they were at least paying them, but it was not a lot.
so
It was indentured servitude.
true.
Exactly.
And one of the reasons, that's going to sound crazy, but so I used to run obstacle course runs all the time, OCRs with Spartans and Tough Mudders, but I had to give that crap up because my biggest fear, and one person brought it to me very plainly, he's like, Russell, at the end of these races, what do you get? I was like, I get a medal. It's like back when they did this back in the 1800s, they got this thing called freedom. So when I thought long and hard about that, I was like, my biggest concern is, will they actually do these races on our plantation and not know it? So we kind of unpacked the problem, and it's a very lengthy problem. I think you've all unpacked. How do we now begin to identify the solutions? How do we go back and reclaim our narrative? What are we doing right? What can we do that's better? What can we do to improve reclaiming the narrative? I'll go to Rebecca.
Well, first of all, we have to educate ourselves. A lot of Black people don't know their own history. A lot of Black people don't have never sat down with the master teacher on a really complex African history lesson. If you ask a lot of our Black people in America, what our African countries produce and how they can be self-sustainable without European invasion and theft. Just understanding the power of our history and our knowledge and who the heck Queen Nzinga was and Mansa Musa and the invasion of all these empires. Just understand that. Understand why we have melanin. Understand what melanin is. And I know you guys think like, well, what does that have to do? But I'm telling you, I became a better writer, actor, producer. I became a better artist when I just learned basic Black biology. When I learned the power of melanin. When I learned how, the power of how, our pineal gland works and all that. And then when you watch these films like Avatar, these white folks know, and they're telling themselves the stories of us, but in these kind of symbolic ways. When you work with top producers, white producers, they know the stories of us. We just don't know our own stories. We don't know our own biology. We don't know our own spirituality. But we have to educate ourselves in our own spirituality. We have to educate ourselves on who we are. We have to be unapologetic. And when white people try to insert themselves in our world, in our lane, we need to push them out. Push them out unapologetically and say, you do not belong here. You have no right. Yes, because they don't have certain rights, white people. You have no right to be in this space. Bye. This is our world. This is our time. And we're owning it. That's one. The second thing is we need to invest in each other. We need to invest in ourselves. The power of the Black dollar is way more powerful than all these white European nations combined, and they know that. There was a thing on TikTok that I saw, and the guy asked, like, if we were given reparations, Black people were given reparations, and the government said that we had to leave, would we leave? Heck yeah, we would leave. And you know what would happen? We would leave, and this country would fail. This country would not exist. We'd give it 5 years. This country would implode on itself because they don't have anything. White folks don't do anything for themselves. They lean on us forever. So we need to use that financial economic power and pour that back into each other. Fund our own projects, support us, have our own platforms, have our own that exists, by the way. Everybody check out Fanbase, started by Isaac Hayes III, Isaac Hayes' son. We need to pour back into those projects. And third, this is really Black people, we need to understand the beautiful power of the arts. Black people do not understand the immense, incredible power of the arts. We are constantly telling our children, oh, go into engineering, go into tech, go into the. First of all, artists can do all of that. We can be engineers, we can be tech people, we can do webs. Artists are the most creative people on earth. We are the most we can take we know marketing, we know algorithms because we have to do it with our own projects. So when we start really valuing the arts and knowing that the arts actually educate us subconsciously while we're laughing, while we're crying, we need as a community support our artists unapologetically and completely dedicate ourselves to that industry. And once
And
we start those three things, then other things will start to just fall into place.
right, and I want to go ahead and pivot back to you briefly because I know we're in the interest of time, but at the same time, you are a digital content creator. You actually produced a
Yeah,
web series of your own,
yeah.
and I love the school teacher episode. That one
Thank you.
resonated with me.
Thank you.
So my question is, talk to me about that space because Issa Rae, she got started there, but I'm sure she was not the first. But talk to me
No.
about this space where we are now beginning to just scratch the surface as far as being, using webisodes and using, I guess, the word of mouth to crowdsource, to build our audiences, to begin to tell our stories, to begin to tell our narratives, to reclaim that narrative.
First of all, I just want to say the reason why I rolled my eyes when you said Issa Rae, brother, I love Issa Rae. I love you. If ever she watches this, I love you. We're twin birthdays. We both have our birthday on January 12th. But the reason why I roll our eyes is that Black people always go to Issa Rae whenever we talk about web series and going from nothing to something, right?
Right.
You're right. There were so many other Black artists who were putting their own work out on the web back in like 2003, 2004. And so, but what it was is that Issa Rae learned how to market herself. She was great at branding. She was great at sharing her content. She learned those algorithms. How to get in that space. First of all, I just want to tell you that Dre and we produced that web series with less than $20,000. And it's high quality. It's award when we won awards for it. We have been in multiple film festivals. We even were approached by TV1 and other like I was about to say the list, but I can't say them. But I can tell you we were approached by TV1 and some other networks that wanted to buy our content, and this was right before COVID happened. And they want our content, and they wanted to acquire it. But anyway, so we just didn't want to let go of the rights. So that was the pushback. But it can be done. And this has been going on for a long time. Black people, we actually started social media. I don't know if you guys remember Black Planet. Like
That's where I met my wife.
We talked about that. My students don't believe me when we had that conversation.
And that was in 2001, right? That was before stupid Zuckerberg and his, micro genitalia tried to do stuff.
Wow.
Like he is so evil. That man is so evil.
Oh, I should have known we were gonna get some laughs.
Right. I mean, but the point is, like, those twins that he stole the idea from, they got that idea from the creator of Black Planet, a brother. I think he graduated from Howard. So we have to give credit where credit is due, you guys. And and I love you, Gen Z. I have a stepdaughter who's Gen Z. I'm always telling her, before you guys speak, know what you're talking about. Because we have been doing this for a very long time. And if anything, the reason why things exist today for a lot of Black people is because a lot of us, we did a lot of the hard work and laid down the gravel. You guys just learned how to pave it over. So,
damn.
I mean, let's be real. And I have to give credit where credit is due. There were people that were digging the path before me, right? So I can't totally be like, oh, I'm just because of all of us that started off. So yeah, it's a process. What I tell people all the time, and Black young people come to me all the time and say, Rebecca, how can I get in this festival? How can I start writing? Where can I get the budgets and the funding? And what I always say is do the damn work. And like right now, stop talking about it. Stop waiting for somebody to fund you. And you get on your laptop and you just start typing. You create that script out of nothing. You send that email to say, oh, can you read this script for me? Or you make that, you call those people and say, you know what, find that DP and say, you know what, I can't pay you right now, but when we get this show on this or funded, I'll pay you a portion of this, right? And you guys learn to collaborate. Find your village and you collaborate and you make it. Dre and I were able to make that show because we have amazing, amazing friends from Second City and IO and Goodman and all those wonderful, and Steppenwolf, and they loved on us. And then we didn't talk about was my short film in the Mr. Moron. I created that with literally $8,000. And I did that out of my own money, and I was able to scrape. And then I crowdfunded a little bit more. So I just did the work. I found an amazing executive producer, and we collaborated, Brittany Walton, and we collaborated and we made it work. So just do the work, put it up. Indiegogo is a great source of people. Industry professionals go on Indiegogo every day and literally look for Black content. They literally, these white folks go Black content, and it comes, and they watch your stuff on Indiegogo. They watch your stuff on Patreon, but do the damn work.
Larry, I'm gonna pivot to you because we've got roughly about 3 to 4 more minutes, and I want to get your comments on this because I think we're having one of those fire moments. Where do you stand on this?
So
I feel like we're being taken to church.
I gotta go back because she was talking about Black Planet. That is legit where I met my wife. I was just talking with somebody about this like a couple days ago, that before there was Facebook, before there was MySpace, there was Black Planet, Mi Gente, and Asian Peeps, all that same community. And that's where not just people were able to meet, that's where a lot of folk learned web programming, because you could do a whole lot on Black Planet. And they were paying people to do each other's like pages and junk. That was years ago.
20.
You could literally, just like Kat said, you could take nothing and turn it into something. And if you didn't, before you could create your life online now, if you didn't like the way your life was, you could create a whole nother world right there within a Black Planet profile. That was good stuff.
Well,
So going back to what she was saying also, you not only do you need to get out there and create if you feel like you have a story, and not only do you need to get out and support other Black creatives or Black businesses or anything like that, you need to embrace the full spectrum of Blackness. And here's why I say that. Because see, we'll go out, especially when you talk about Black people supporting other Black creatives and Black businesses. We'll go out and we'll get a sample and we'll say, well, I don't like that, so I'm not gonna that is your that you use that as an arbiter for everything Black, right? It's almost like, Beyonce is a talented singer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care for her stuff. And the Beehive will probably come after me about that.
You'll be canceled.
But I can still understand that Beyonce is a very talented and ridiculously gifted singer and everything else that she does. And just all around
just
creative
call her
person.
entertainer, because the singing is up for debate. No one beats Patti
Exactly. But that doesn't mean that I should swear off every other Black artist, right?
Right.
That doesn't mean I should even swear off her husband, So you got
leave Hove alone.
I tell people straight up, I'm not the most Afrocentric person in the world. I don't listen to a whole lot of rap music because it doesn't strike me as anything that I particularly identify with. I grew up in a country middle class neighborhood around a whole bunch of white folk.
I understand.
I don't I do not identify with most of the stuff that rap and hip hop artists put out. I can enjoy it. I can appreciate it. But if Steely Dan says that they're coming to do a concert in Philadelphia tomorrow, I'll be out there.
Understood. I respect that. I understood.
But again, there's room on the spectrum of Blackness to accept those kind of things. You can't just rule somebody out because they don't fit what you think about blackness. And that doesn't mean that you disrespect what other people have going on, because again, that person could all of a sudden, there's probably a whole bunch of people that didn't like the content of the woman who we won't name again because Rebecca doesn't like to hear that name.
Okay, shots
there's
fired.
there's
All
a
right.
whole lot of people that even now do not, that as much as black folk like Insecure, there's a whole bunch of black folk that don't like it. Doesn't mean that there's not room for them on the spectrum, and that doesn't mean that there's not room for other people that have content that is different from that on the spectrum as well. They still deserve for you to give them a chance. And if you don't like it, then go on. That does not mean that because you don't like it, that does not mean that they are your enemy. That just means that you don't like it and you move on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
I don't like these little mumbling rappers out right now, but a whole lot of people in Caleb and Gregory's camp probably left that shit. I can't stand it.
Not my
Give me
camp.
somebody who articulates.
Well, I'm a
Yeah.
traditionalist. I would like to thank our guests for joining us today. This has been a sensational, I had to use your word, sensational discussion. Before we go, I want to go ahead and jump right to our diversity highlight, if you will. And, or not diversity highlight, our multimedia diversity highlight. So the person we're celebrating is, I'm sorry, y'all, we had to put it out there, Issa Rae. We want to thank her for her contribution.
I love her work. I'm just saying, black people always go to Issa Rae. They're like, oh, Issa Rae. I'm like, there's so many other people out there.
Well, no, she's out there. We're just celebrating her work. But again,
Yes,
she's
celebrate her work.
she is not the one, but she is among one of the few who've done it and done it very well. And so we're grateful for her contributions. We want to thank her for that. I want to thank my guests for joining me. Rebecca, powerful gems you left us with today. The students have enjoyed it. Larry, you always deliver. I'm just going to call you the mailman because you always come through. My two student guests who held it down, you all did fantastic. I want to thank you all for joining us. As always, it has been one of the highlights of my Thursday day, and we're looking forward to our next show. And until then, be safe, be well, and we'll see you at the next show where the students will actually produce the whole thing. Until then, be safe, be well. Peace.